Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Sunday Messages. Today, we're going to be talking about trust. I was recently asked a question about trusting the unknown, and I know that people have this thing that they call trust issues, or, I can never trust anyone ever again. And to be honest, my perspective on this is completely different. My experience with this is completely different. And I think that the idea of putting your trust in an external source of any kind is actually inevitably setting you up for some pretty nasty aches and pains, if you ask me. So I'll be unpacking all of this, of course, and just a couple housekeeping items that I want to remind you of. God's Looking Glass will be taken down off of YouTube on September 30th, and then it will be up on my website if you would like to get a hold of it on there. The second item of business that I would like to remind you of is that we start Apex on October 1st. So Apex is a 2-month container with me, really going deep into energetic refinement. This is a massive energetic, spiritual, and emotional reset button. And this is mastermind style. So there's a weekly call. You get access to me every single day. And this, in my opinion, is one of the best ways that you can set yourself up for 2022. Right? Being in the energy, really preparing your field, really locking in a clean state, a pure state, so you can create with ease. That's the main thing that we're going for here. It's very easy to have a mixed bag show up in your life when your energetic field is super cluttered. So what we're doing is completely hacking this system so you can get yourself in a position where you are just easily and effortlessly staying aligned. So I really wanted Apex to be like the energetic version of Olympic training. This really, really deep, intense, energetic refinement that I want every single person who's in Apex to experience. And yeah, be there, apply. If you feel called, you are more than welcome to head over to onyxhealing.com/apex, go to the description box, check out the link in the show notes, wherever you're listening to this. Just head over, check it out, get a feel for it, and I will see you inside. Okay, let's dive in. Now, I haven't done this in a while, but I decided to look up the specific definitions of trust. So here they are. The first definition of trust is assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. The second definition is one in which confidence is placed. So the first thing that I'm noticing about these definitions is they're actually quite soft. When people talk about trust, it is as if it's ironclad. Like, really think about this. When trust is broken for a lot of people, talk about hysterics. That's where they start to come out. And on an energetic level, this makes complete and utter sense. Because what happens when you're saying, I trust you to do something, not do something, behave a certain way, say a certain thing, or whatever is attached to that piece of trust, this is actually outsourcing your sense of well-being to another human. You understand that you're going to get hurt every time you do that. And the reason being is that other people are reflective. They are reflective of your state. They are reflective of your beliefs. They're reflective of the energy that you're holding. The relationships that you have are big fat mirrors, or they're portals. So putting what you're calling trust, aka your sense of well-being, in a mirror, dude, that is a one-way ticket to disaster. The first thing is that this is pretty much going to inspire codependency no matter what. In this context, I will explain a different context of trust and go through different iterations of it and all the different dynamics and everything. But right now I'm looking at the stereotypical trust, like, oh my God, you're one of the only people that I'm telling all my secrets. Oh wow, I really trust you to never tell another soul. So this flavor of trust is something that is extremely codependent, and your sense of well-being or safety is completely predicated on the behavior of another. Terrible, 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 and sloppy. Let me tell you, this is so sloppy and poorly thought out. The second thing that I notice about people who engage with trust in this way is that for whatever reason, people fall into a lot of powerlessness around this topic, and they completely abandon energetic principles when it comes to trust. And to me, I guess part of this is because this is my entire job, is working with energetics. And so it's very easy for me to move through the day working with energetics, and that being the lens that I see the world through. But a lot of the times, as soon as people come up against trust, they abandon energetic principles and think that they no longer apply, and they shift and do a 180 into free will. Everything is about free will, and it's that other person's free will that makes it so that we keep trust or they break trust. So I am going to say something that I think a lot of people will disagree with, because it's a very strong, albeit extreme, perspective. But what I would say, and the argument that I would make, is that you don't actually have to trust anyone. You don't have to trust anyone outside of yourself at all, ever. You do not need to depend on someone else being trustworthy at all, ever. Because again, let's go back to, if relationships and other people are mirrors of yourself, they are reflecting something to you. And that reflection is going to be indicative of your energetic state. So if you're seeing things through this perspective, who cares about trust if you're just refining your energetic state? And based on that refinement and the clarity of your energy, that is going to determine what happens to the people and relationships that are in your life. I'm going to speak to this from the vantage point of my own experience, because I think this is going to it's going to make it easier for me to deliver the information. So when I get asked about trust, usually like sometime after a session, or I'll be marinating on a topic, and then I'll reflect on my own sense of trust. And it's so interesting, because in reality, I feel like I don't trust anyone, as in I don't even consider it to be important in the slightest. It's not something that I give any thought or energy to. I actually don't care about trust very much. Not in the sense of like, I don't care if people harm me or violate boundaries, but this trust thing that people get really caught up in, I really do not give it any energy whatsoever. And once I realized this, I started asking myself why. Like, why do I not care or have any real negative experiences around trust? Or why do I not get hung up on trust? You know, especially with the parents that I had, I should be a highly distrusting person, right? Someone who's anticipating getting hurt by others. That's what my background and my childhood informed me of. So why is it that I come from an abusive household, a neglectful household, but I'm not worried about people breaking trust? And what I realized is I don't trust people, I trust my judgment. I don't trust others, I trust my intuition. I don't trust others, I trust my soul. I don't trust others, I trust God. I don't trust the outcome, I trust my path. You see all of these pieces where other people are like scattering their sense of well-being. Mine is really, really oriented towards myself. The secondary filter that I use, and this is something that I didn't notice until I brought some consciousness to it, but this is also one of the ways that I don't experience guilt, is that when I'm looking at a decision that I'm about to make or something that I'm about to do, I run it through the filter of, if the worst case happened, how would I feel about that? So let's go back to the secret thing. Okay, you meet someone, there's somewhat of a fresh relationship. Now, before you share all your secrets, how would you feel if that person did share? Could you handle that? Do you trust yourself to be able to hold yourself through that? Would it be okay? Could you handle the blowout from that experience? And if the answer is yes, then it really doesn't make a difference if they do or don't say anything. So do whatever you want. If you trust yourself, no matter the outcome, who cares? And then if they break your trust, well, there you go. They've revealed themselves to be an untrustworthy person, and you can weed them out. Problem solved. No issue. So when I'm thinking about trust, my relationship with trust is that you can give someone the opportunity to reveal who they are. And I think it's really wise for you to do that. You don't need to just stay in the basement and hide from people because you're afraid of them breaking your trust. Ooh, you can handle more than I think you give yourself credit for. And the other thing is, why, if you're worried about someone not being trustworthy, then why trust them with everything? Why not just give them a morsel and see what they do with that? See how it goes. They don't need the whole cake. So you don't need to worry. But a lot of people are so concerned with trust, and I just don't get it. It's like if your gut is saying, don't trust this person, then don't. If you're saying, I'm just nervous about trusting, but I really can't tell if this is my intuition or if it's just fear of being hurt from past experiences, then just try a crumb. Give them a crumb. See what they do with that. See how it lands. You don't need to do everything all at once. You can titrate little bits and pieces of vulnerabilities or whatnot. Now, the other thing with trust that really baffles me is the idea of, if you're worried about people not being trustworthy, and this is something that's a common concern of yours, my question is, what are you really trusting people with? I feel like in my own experience, the things that actually do require a high level of emotional exchange, or there's intimacy exchange, or there's different situations that do require a high level of integrity, in terms of if there's a lapse in integrity, it could really do some damage to me. Those situations are so freaking rare. So rare. So I'm just wondering, for people who are trust phobic, my question for you would be this. Are you looking at the proportions of the situation appropriately? And what I mean is, are you making a mountain out of a molehill when it comes to this whole trust thing? Is it, oh my God, you were 1 minute late. I can never trust you ever again. You said you were going to be here at 12. You are here at 12:01. That is it. I don't want anything to do with you. I can't handle this. Okay, if you're acting like that, you need to go to therapy. You have a deeper issue, you need to go regulate your nervous system, you need to fix that shit, because you're going to struggle for a very long time if you're responding that way when it comes to trust. That's a very disproportionate response to what's going on, okay? Or is this a situation where you are just hypersensitive, where having something like someone showing up a minute later, or something else small, you get the idea, that could inspire really negative feeling, that you end up conflating and blending in with the whole trust thing. As in, I don't necessarily want to get close or develop any relationships because I can't handle the small things that might go awry, or the little human stuff that happens in relationships, right? Or the third possibility is you're a criminal who is on a regular and consistent basis committing felonies. And so therefore, your experience of trust is very different because your life is literally on the line if you do not keep your mouth shut. And you could wind up in jail if you are not remaining silent. That's the third option, is you do have a lot of situations that could do extreme damage on your life if you are not locking it up tight. I don't know how many criminals are listening to my podcast. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure. I haven't checked my listener demographics for this, but I'm going to go ahead and say the likelihood of you being in that type of situation is slim to none. So then this comes back around. If you're not blowing things out of proportion, if you're not just hypersensitive, right? If it's not just constantly triggering an abandonment wound or something like that, and if you're not a criminal with loads of secrets that could wind you up in prison or potentially murdered, then what is the deal with trust? Why is it this big to-do that people have? From my perspective, I really don't consider trust to be that big of a deal because your judgment matters more. And remember, with all of this, you can run experiments on everything that you have when it comes to your relationships with others. I run experiments all the time, or you can just set really firm boundaries if you're not ready for that yet. I'll give you an example. This is a small trust thing. I think I was like 16 or 17 at the time. One of my dad's ex-girlfriends, who drinks a lot of red wine, asked me if she could borrow a white blouse of mine. And I told her absolutely not. You will not be wearing any white articles of clothing when you're drinking red wine. And she was so clumsy. I'm like, of course I don't trust you. Absolutely not. No, white and you do not mix, and they will never mix, and I will never have you in any white articles of clothing of mine, ever, ever, ever. Done. Clear. My judgment was sound. I was right. And if I had to bet money, I can almost guarantee you I found a red wine stain on her later that evening, and I was like, see? Thank God. Thank God I had the foresight. Here's another petty example. My best friend is damn near the polar opposite of me. Really, we could not be more different, I don't think. And she has a tendency when it comes to how we take care of our material possessions, we're very different. You know, it's like her car is a mess, my car has almost nothing in it. We bought the same purse at the same time. Hers looked like it was on the verge of falling apart. Mine lasted in pristine condition for like 5 years, right, before it started to get a little bit of wear and tear. You get the idea. So one day, she asked me if she could borrow like a set of CDs. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to give her these CDs. And they were probably like $50 in value. And I told myself, I'm just going to see what happens. The condition that they're returned in, I am going to trust her in this moment and see. Well, I never got the CDs back. And that pretty much sealed her fate on borrowing my stuff. Borrowing my stuff is an absolutely fuck no from me. I'm already really possessive. And so then when you add that into the mix, it's just going to be an automatic no. And that's okay. It's not a matter of oh, it was so taxing on our relationship, these CDs. No, I gave her the opportunity. Yes, it was a test. She failed the test. Done. That's it. You get a big fat F on that test, and that's okay. I love you no matter what. It's just that this is not our thing. This is not a thing or a territory that we're going to venture in this relationship in particular. That's cool. That's totally fine. It's not a big deal. It doesn't need to destroy your life, is what I'm saying. But you need to be wise about this, right? You need to be cognizant of who you're dealing with in whatever depth the relationship is, right? I think by the time I allowed her the opportunity to borrow the CDs and see what she would do with them, I mean, we were like 8-9 years into friendship. So I know who she is. I know what I'm getting myself into, and then I'm taking an appropriate risk that I will be okay with no matter the outcome. I always knew as soon as I handed over those CDs, I was 100% okay and in acceptance of the outcome of that experiment. And now there is no need for any more experimentation when it comes to her borrowing my stuff. Not needed. However, this same exact friend, if I needed to confide in someone and I wanted to know that information, I felt good about being heard about something that was very personal and very private and very vulnerable, she would also be the first person that I would go to. So it's like borrowing my CDs is off limits, but if I need to pour my heart out, she gets an A+. And there's so much history and there's been so many conversations that it feels very relaxing to have that place to go. And there is no stress. There's no distrust in the mix. And on top of that, an even deeper layer is actually understanding how inherently protected I am, or I don't know if protected is the right word, but it's this deep, deep, deep knowing that even if she were to get on a roof with a bullhorn and shout my secrets to the world, I still would be unshakable. Still. The source that I'm plugged into could override anything that she could possibly do with any of the information that I've shared with her for years. Could not rattle me. Would it hurt? Oh, absolutely. If she did that to me, if there was like this deep sacredness that was broken in our relationship, of course that would hurt, but it also wouldn't break me. It would not ruin my life. It wouldn't destroy my livelihood. It wouldn't destroy any of the other relationships in my life. So really, what is the risk? It's really just the sanctity of the relationship is the only thing that would be harmed. And at that point, bitch, it's your loss. So what do I have to worry about? I could handle that. I could handle any of those situations, so I'm not worried about them or feeding them. This is why I feel so firmly, and you don't really need to trust other people. You need to trust yourself. You need to trust that you've got yourself, that you have proper judgment, that you're looking at situations clearly and then moving from that place of clarity, and that you're not overexerting yourself or doing something like trauma dumping or being prematurely vulnerable with someone that you don't know all that well. Those things are very destabilizing, and it's really energetically sloppy. So of course, those things aren't going to feel good when it comes to this whole trust thing. But if you are not living in the camp of being hypersensitive to trust being broken or little human things that happen in relationships, and you're not blowing things out of proportion, then the next question is, okay, is the sense of distrust that you're feeling instinctual? If I don't trust someone, like if I have that feeling of I can't trust you with anything, I couldn't even trust you to hold my car keys, then don't. Like, I don't push myself to trust people like that. But what I think is the key thing here is what's an emotional wound that's being activated and what is instinct? What's your gut? What's your intuition trying to communicate to you? Because if you don't have the emotional wounding piece sorted, then of course those things can be muddy. Now, from an attraction, purely energetic standpoint, a lot of what I have unpacked for you isn't needed a lot of the time because what I'm actually refining is my energy. So if you clean up your energy, you're going to clean up the caliber of people who step into your space. If you're an energetic match for people who have really solid integrity, who are true to their word, who are reliable, who are dependable, who show up for you where there's reciprocity or there's a really good sense of professionalism between you. I mean, if you're refining all of this, then it basically eliminates the whole trust thing. Like, it's not needed because you've already refined your energy so much to the point where you don't need to worry about being blindsided by anything. And usually any of the interpersonal stuff that comes up is simply revealing old patterns, old belief systems, energetic debris, places that there's been unconsciousness. And that's the fun part, in my opinion, when you get to a place where what's happening in your relationships doesn't constantly feel devastating, but instead is just keeping you in a space where you can continue to refine your relationships with others in a way that feels really expansive. That's a good spot because you're not going to be dealing with everything going 100% your way, because that would imply that you don't have to evolve anymore or that there's nothing left to experience, and that's just not true. So you do want the humanness of relationships in the mix, but you want them in a way that isn't knocking you over or causing lots of distress, things like that. In my experience, even people who have really crappy situations, as in getting cheated on or things where they were betrayed, right? This whole I trusted someone deeply and then they broke it in a way that caused a lot of damage. Many of the people that I talk to about this and that I've heard from and that I've watched in real time, they look back on the experience and they're like, oh, I could have done that differently. Oh, I should have paid attention to that. 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 Typically, it doesn't start as a massive betrayal. A lot of the time, the vast majority of the time, it's building up. And there are lots of little places that we have a tendency to neglect or overlook or avoid that can lead to things that shock us into consciousness. And so the way to mitigate that is to incorporate more consciousness into your relationships. It's not necessary. I mean, I can't speak to everyone's experience, but I would say that this will spare you a lot of the troubles that you could potentially experience in the future. Consciousness solves a lot. It repairs a lot, it heals a lot, it clarifies a lot, and it will help you in unimaginable ways. So for me, I don't depend on others. I depend on my level of consciousness, and I trust that my relationships are going to reflect that level of consciousness to me in all ways. And anything that I have forgotten or been slacking on or need to refine will be presented to me in my relationships, and I don't make that a bad thing. I embrace it and then correct accordingly. Let me speak to one more thing regarding trust. This is more of the universal trust, like having trust in the unknown. So let me just frame this in a way that is going to make it really, really simple. Now, you have a neutral grid. You can think about it like a grid, or you can think about it like a blank sheet of paper, or maybe a blueprint that's out in front of you, like the blueprint paper that's sitting there, but there's nothing in it yet. Think about it as being blank. So anything is possible in the unknown because it's blank. The reason why you're not experiencing it as being blank is because we are stuck in a certain amount of momentum and patterns and repetitive behaviors that are also creating until we bring our consciousness to them and adjust them. So in reality, you can do whatever you want with the blank sheet of paper. Do whatever you want with the grid. But for most of us, we have to get the human part of ourself on board with this. And that's the part that takes some work, it takes some intentionality, and it takes really deliberate focus in order to sculpt it out and actually have it drop into your experience. So yes, when it comes to the energetics, you can do whatever you want. But the reason why people say, I'm afraid of the unknown, the vast majority of the time, they're not afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of the same thing occurring, or that thing that happened in the past happening again. They're afraid of things not evolving and not changing and not getting better. But the thing is, this is a really disempowered standpoint, because if you do agree that you have influence over your experience, you're in charge. You're creating your experience. Okay, if you accept that, you are in an energetic world and you experience it through your 3D senses, then if you had full trust in that, you wouldn't worry about what was coming next, because you're consciously creating and you can trust your creations. The thing that I'm trying to get across is that you're not doing guesswork. You're not throwing a Hail Mary. You're not crossing your fingers. So once again, this comes back to self. Do you trust that you have the ability to create or not? If you're afraid of the unknown, then what that tells me is that you're afraid you're not a creator. You're worried it's not going to work for you. You're worried about dropping the ball or failing yourself, or not expanding and evolving into your full potential, right? There's all sorts of things that we can fear, but I don't actually think people fear the unknown in the way that they think they do. Unknown is neutral. So if you just see it as neutral and you treat it as neutral, and the only reason why you're not stepping out onto blank paper is because you've been alive for a certain amount of time and you've been creating for all of this time. And so of course things are showing up because you've been working on them for a long time. So yeah, of course you're having a 3D experience. So this idea of trusting the unknown, that concept in itself doesn't make sense. That's like saying, I trust blank paper. Okay? But I would say a more accurate description is, I trust that what unfolds and what materializes is going to be energetically congruent with my dominant energetic state. You can trust in that, and that's a safe place to put your trust because you're in charge of it. You can change it, you can shift it. It's something that's malleable, that you can refine over time, and it can get better and better and better and better. Let me speak to one more thing on this matter, and then we're going to wrap up. As far as trust goes, in terms of God, universe, divine source, you're already trusting a lot, right? You're not launching yourself into outer space just to make sure the sun is going to come up tomorrow. You just know that it's going to. There's so much certainty and knowing about that it has no choice but to be true. So here's the thing. You can't say that you distrust the universe, God, divine source, or what some people would call the unknown, even though I think about these things as being separate. Remember, the unknown is the blank paper the blank grid, the blueprint that doesn't have anything in it yet. And then God, universe, divine source is the orchestrator of everything that you cannot personally touch. So think about how many things have come together in your life that you have had no conscious awareness of, that you wouldn't have been able to think of or consider, that you were completely blind to. But all of these things had to happen and had to be created. There had to be energetics in place that allowed that thing to come to you, that put everything together for you to experience it. So all of that stuff is something completely beyond you. So even though you may not have had any conscious awareness of all of these things happening and all of these things taking place behind the scenes, the fact that you weren't conscious or aware of it actually makes it easier to quote unquote trust, because you're simply oblivious to it. So it's easy to trust something that you have no awareness of. This is also why one of the things that I actually steer people away from is asking how things will come about. You start sticking your fingers in the pie and ruining everything as soon as you ask how. How is the money going to come in? Boom, you shut a million doors as soon as you start asking that question and thinking about things linearly. So it's a contradiction to say, I believe in energetics, but I don't trust things that are greater than me or things that I can't see. You can't hold both of those statements at the same time. So anytime you're questioning or you're shifting into thinking too linearly, you're abandoning the energetic piece and you're going straight into, I'm only trusting what I can observe. Or I feel like I need to start tampering with all of the mechanics in order for me to feel safe. That's not true. Like I said, you're not launching yourself into outer space to make sure the sun comes up. So, from that standpoint, you do trust things. You are trusting. You do understand that there are some things, there's a lot of things, there are forces greater than you that are working on your behalf for you to have the experience that you're having. So really, when we get into this trust of universal forces, if you get too heady, if you start thinking way, way, way too linearly, you shift into thinking that you have to do and manage everything, which is impossible. And when you shift back into energetics and just knowing that energetics, treating them as law, I know not everyone does, but if you treat them as law, then there's no guesswork. So you get to have the certainty and know that the energetics are working for you and have trust that there are things larger than you that are working on your behalf. So when you're operating at this level of trust, then this is more of the kick your feet up, relax, receive. Allow things to work for you. Hold the energy, but quit sticking your fingers in the pie. Quit shifting into your linear mind, asking how, and then closing every door. You cut yourself off from all of the magic as soon as you get into the linear questions. Because here's the thing. If you do believe that you're a creator in this life, if you believe that manifestation is a thing, then all you are in charge of is the energetic state that you're in, the emotions that you're circulating dominantly, what you believe, what you think, what you're telling yourself. That is all you're in charge of, is what you're lining up with on an energetic level. Everything else you literally cannot control. Now, you do have ultimate control over the outcome or what comes into your field, what comes into your space. You are in charge of that. That's why I created DOM. For example, that class that I taught back in August was for this specific reason, because you do have control over that, but the details all of the hows and the whos and the whats and the whens and that stuff, you never have any control over those pieces and how they're being moved on the board because you can't see them. You're completely blind. From that standpoint, you don't actually have anything else to do but trust. What are you going to do? All you can do is trust in your energetics. That's it. The only thing you have control over is your energetics, and that's going to inform everything else that comes into your space. So you have two options at this point. You either trust your own energetics, and you know that that's true and everything else is working for you on your behalf, and it's going to match. It's going to be congruent with your energetic state, or you kick and scream. You fight, you resist, you complain, you continue to ask how, you stick your fingers in the pie, you make a mess, you get in the way of all of these pieces that are coming together for you. You create so much resistance and so much frustration that ends up being reflected to you again and again and again, and you just spiral into a pit of despair because you refuse to relax. That's the alternative. So if you break it down like that, what would you rather do? Would you rather chill or would you rather kick and scream? And knowing that if you're relaxed, things will happen faster and easier. And if you kick and scream, that is going to be a long, painful, miserable road. So you have to teach yourself to relax. All right, my friends. This has been a good one. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you feel that someone you know needs to hear this discussion, then go ahead and send it their way. I always appreciate your support, your shares, your comments, your reflections, the messages that I get. I appreciate each and every one of you. Do not forget, God's Looking Glass gets taken down on September 30th, and we start Apex on October 1st. So if you are wanting to get in, go to onyxhealing.com/apex, apply, come be in my container for 2 months. We're going to kick ass and take names. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be glorious. I cannot wait to have you inside. And that's all that I've got. Have a beautiful week, everybody. I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.